In Climate Watch, when it comes to importing garbage, no country bought in more of it than China. The nation was the world's largest importer of trash until January, when it started banning some recycled imports. And now that ban is in full effect. Some American cities are forced to dump large amounts of plastic and paper into the landfills instead of sending it to China for processing. Livia Albeck-Ripka has been writing about the situation for the New York Times, and she joins us now. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So, what led to this ban?
So, as part of a broader anti-pollution campaign, China announced last summer that it was planning to ban a number of materials from being imported. And as part of that ban, plastic as well as mixed paper and a number of other materials were banned from entering China. And previously, the US was exporting a third of all of its recycling, and Americans recycle 66 million tons of material a year, and most of that was going to China.
So now that this ban has been put into place, it's going to impact all states, but primarily in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, it's a very complicated situation. Particularly the West Coast has been affected. There are many places in the US where recycling is going on as usual. But along the West Coast, that is really where they were heavily reliant on exporting materials to China. And, you know, Oregon, for example, which people think of as a very green state, people there are very proud of their recycling, has been hit really hard by this ban.
So then where's all this stuff going to go?
So at the moment, waste managers are trying to figure this out. In some cases, they are stockpiling material in the hopes that China will reconsider its policy. Other countries have stepped in, like India, Vietnam, Indonesia, and they're accepting some plastic, for example, but still, like the plastic exports are down by 40% overall. And then in other cases, waste managers are saying, look, we're just going to limit the number of materials that we accept now from the public. And in some cases, they are going to landfill, particularly in regional areas. You know, the trucks might be doing their regular recycling routes, but then ending up going to the landfill because waste managers don't want the public to change their behavior.
So you've been writing about this for some time, but let me ask you, so it's great that the United States recycles and people recycle, and the numbers are, 66 million tons of recyclables that Americans do every year. But does it feel as if just by sending our stuff out to other countries, we're just shifting the problem to another country? Because what happens when those materials get to China or India or Vietnam? What do they do with them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the waste management community is really talking about this as a huge wake-up call for the US. Before, we were just kind of outsourcing this problem, and now they're saying, look, China was willing to accept all of this material that was highly contaminated, and contamination can be anything from scraps of pad thai in a takeout container to something that just doesn't belong in the recycling bin, like a bowling ball, for example, which surprisingly, waste managers get a lot of bowling balls. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
But it's so waste managers are saying this is a huge wake-up call, and it's something that the public also can participate in helping to solve. So things like disposable coffee cups, for example, which many people think of as recyclable. You know, they seem like cardboard, but actually in order to make those liquid-proof, there's a fine film inside of polyethylene, and it's really difficult to separate out that plastic from the paper. Some facilities have that capacity, so it's really important that people check with their local guidelines as to whether they can recycle disposable coffee cups in their area. But in many places, those aren't recyclable. So if in doubt, throw it out. That's the best way to sort of do your part to help this issue of contamination.
So yeah, that's one. Those are maybe you can share with our viewers some tips, some other tips for better recycling.
Yeah.
I know it's a struggle even here in New York City because there are bins for various things, but some plastics are not recyclable. Sometimes you have to look to see if it's a certain number, and it's not always clear. So you try to do your part, but then you find out that you're actually, in some instances, you're actually harming the environment.
Of course. So New York City has not been hit as hard as some other states. So again, check your local guidelines. Plastics 3 through 7, for example, have become those that are less marketable. So look for the little number inside the triangle, and then check that against your local guidelines, and you'll see whether or not in your area that's recyclable or not. Waste managers call, when people are putting something in the recycling bin in the hopes that it will just get turned into something new somewhere down the line. They call that aspirational recycling. So they're really calling on us to stop being aspirational recyclers.
Where you hope that like your pad thai container is going to become
like,
a cone.
Oh, this seems like it could be recyclable. Yeah. So don't do that. If you're in doubt, just get rid of it. Another big one is pizza boxes. In some areas, again, they're recyclable, but if they're really greasy, tear off the half that's greasy, recycle the good half, put the other one in the trash, or in some places you can compost that as well. Plastic bags are another one. They just clog up the machinery.
But aren't most plastic bags now, like when they use the term biodegradable, doesn't that mean that they're going to degrade on their own even if they're stuck in a landfill?
I mean,
or does that mean it's going to take 1,000 years?
It depends, really. There's biodegradable, and then there's there are a few different terms for those kind of plastic bags. But while there are some facilities where you could go drop them off, like generally speaking, the bag that you get at your local bodega is not going to be recyclable.
Important reporting. Livia Albeck-Ripka, thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great.